Hello and good Friday morning. Happy March Madness Day 2. I am Sam Sprunger. Dalton Shetler. He's at the women's uh, tournament, and they'll actually be kicking off their tournament. Michigan State will be here in just a little bit. So he's busy getting prepped for that and was not able to make it this morning. But I wanted to jump back on here after our tournament March Madness special yesterday to kind of talk about the breakdown of day one and how there are a lot of people that are talking about their brackets being pretty broken already. And only after half the first round is in the books. And there are a lot of broken brackets in some senses. I still think that there are probably not any main teams that people had going to the finals or the Final Four even, or the Elite Eight. And a quick talk about what we're looking at when it comes to when you're picking brackets. Yeah, you're going to get some stuff wrong, and there are some people that will nail the first round, but then they take flyers a little too far, maybe, and end up with a broken bracket as you go down the road. The main key is if you're going to miss them, miss the ones that are only one win teams. I missed 6 on day one, 6 of 16. I'm 10 for 16 on my picks, but I've only lost one of my Sweet 16 teams, and that was a flyer on McNeese. And I tell you what, Gonzaga is turning into much like what I always say about Michigan State and being able to kind of pencil them into one or two wins in the tournament. And let's jump over to that one. Actually, Michigan State tips off the tournament with a dominating game against Mississippi State, a 69-51 win over the Bulldogs. And I tell you what, Michigan State looked like a different team. And Dalton and I talked about that yesterday before the tournament kicked off, was which Spartan team was going to show up. Was it the team that played against Purdue and in the Big Ten tournament in Minneapolis last week, or is it the team that kind of floundered back and forth and couldn't really put together much? They showed up yesterday and they put a beat down to Mississippi State. I'm not saying it's gonna happen, but look out, North Carolina, because you're getting a Tom Izzo team that is now starting to put together something. So maybe the Spartans put a push to the Tar Heels tomorrow afternoon for the right to go to the West semifinals in LA. But like I mentioned, North Carolina taking care of Wagner with little to no issue. Upsets were abound. Okay, there were a few upsets here. The first one of the tournament was Duquesne. Duquesne hadn't won a tournament game since 1977. They take down the BYU Cougars, and the BYU just couldn't get anything going. Duquesne takes that game. They will take on Illinois, the other Big Ten team that was in action yesterday. Only 2 of the 6 in action yesterday, and the Illini struggled a little bit with Morehead State in that first half, and getting going in the second half. They kind of put Morehead State to bed on that one too. Dayton takes down the 10 seed Nevada. That's not an upset necessarily, except for there were a lot of people selecting the Steve Alford led Wolfpack to go into the second weekend. I've seen some even saying that they would make it to the Final Four, that they were that sexy Cinderella double-digit seed that could make it to the Final Four. The Wolfpack go home after one game. The Flyers coming back, they were down by double digits in the second half and came back and win that game and advance to take on Arizona, who put Long Beach State away pretty quickly. Such a great story. We didn't talk about that yesterday, but the Long Beach State Dan Monson, the former Minnesota coach, he left Minnesota 17 years ago and went to Long Beach State. He was notified after the regular season was done, before the or before the conference tournament took place, and said that was told that he was not going to be retained. Well, when he wasn't retained, what Long Beach State do? They went and won the conference tournament and extended Monson's tenure as the coach for a little bit longer. So they got to play in the big dance, and they fall to the Wildcats. One silly thing that I saw come out from that was the Long Beach State AD announced, "Yeah, we made that decision to not bring Monson back, and announced that in hopes that we would make the tournament." No, you didn't. No, you didn't. You were trying to beat the curve. Okay, we're looking for a new coach. We can start looking for a coach. Well, guess what? The current coach just extended our season longer. Well, we can't say we're upset with Monson because we're in the tournament, and we can't go looking for a new coach, because who would want to announce they have a new coach while they're still playing? So they really did want to get that coach quickly. Now they can. Now that the Long Beach State team has been eliminated, but you can't tell me that you let him go hoping that we'll make the tournament. No, you were wanting to get your coach and do it quickly while the tournament was happening, and maybe picking up one of these coaches that is from a lower conference that has some upside. Well, guess what? Monson kind of threw the fly in your ointment there, and was took Long Beach State to the tournament. But so the Arizona advances. They will take on Dayton tomorrow afternoon. Tennessee, Texas, they both win. They're the higher seeds. Creighton struggled for a little bit with Akron. It's not a shock that these small teams for a half hold on and pull and really hold on to and compete with these guys. It's the longevity. It's just like if these teams were playing a series, the higher ranked team or the better team is probably going to win a series of games. If you play best of 3, they're probably winning 2 of 3. A best of 7, you're definitely going to probably see rarely a lower seeded team. A big gap between seeds. 8 and 9 seed, that to me is not an upset. But 7 to 10, not really an upset. When you get to the 6-11, that's an upset. When you get to the 5-12, that's an upset. So the better team is normally going to win in the long run in a series. Now, when you get in a game, that happens. That's where we get upsets. We haven't covered a couple of these upsets yet from yesterday. And there are a couple more yet that we're going to talk about. But if you played these two teams, if you play BYU and Duquesne in a 5-game series, BYU's probably going to win 3 of those 5. And so that's the great thing about March Madness is it's lose and go home, win and advance, survive and advance, survive and advance. So if you get a team that gets a hot streak, 2 or 3 guys hitting shots out of their mind, you can advance a couple of rounds. And that's what we ran into yesterday with Akron, competing for a half. They didn't quite have enough to hold on, and Creighton caught them, extended their lead, and then eventually won going away. So in that portion of the bracket there in Pittsburgh, Creighton will take on the 11 seed Oregon, who went in and just kind of dismantled and led pretty much the whole way against South Carolina. And from the start, it was a couple of points, and then all of a sudden you saw Oregon just kind of pulling away, and it never was close. It was never really in doubt that Oregon was going to advance and win that game and get a date with the Blue Jays on Saturday afternoon. And so now to Salt Lake City, to the half of the bracket that I'm most interested in, because it's the Midwest bracket. This Salt Lake City pod feeds into the regional, and the winner from these games in Salt Lake City, this pod will play the winner of Purdue's. So McNeese and Gonzaga, like I said, Mark Few is much like Tom Izzo now. I'm getting the feeling, because if you remember, we had Mike DeCourcy on just a few weeks ago before the tournament was decided, and he prognosticates and kind of projects. He had Gonzaga on the first teams out at that point. Gonzaga has struggled. Now they turned it around and they started improving. They ended up winning their tournament, the WCC tournament, over St. Mary's. So they ended up with a 5 seed. That, to me, I saw, and McNeese has competed. Will Wade, the former LSU coach, he is the McNeese coach. I saw the perfect storm of maybe this is a down year for Gonzaga, and McNeese is high, playing well, competing against Power 5, Power 6 teams, and really able to compete and win. I saw McNeese maybe being that team that was going to be that Cinderella to make it to the Sweet 16. They fell flat. And Gonzaga was ready. Gonzaga is playing well. Look out for Gonzaga. As a Purdue fan, I now start to worry that maybe Gonzaga is going to make it in to Purdue, against Purdue. And they've played previously, and they played pretty closely. Purdue ended up winning in Maui, but it was a close game. So they will take on Kansas, and let's talk about that game a little bit. They played Samford, and McCullers is out. Their leading scorer for Kansas is out. Hunter Dickinson's dealing with a shoulder injury that, while he can still play, that is still going to bother him. He couldn't shoot very well. He struggled a little bit from the field, but being there and being a threat to be there, that helped Kansas. They were up 1 point late in the game, and there was a phantom foul call. It was a fast break. Hunter Dickinson actually found, I don't remember the young man that was making the break for the dunk. It might have been Furphy, but he went up for the dunk, and the Samford defender came through and swiped, and there was no body contact, no hand contact, nothing. He swiped the ball out, and I think the foul that was called was how violent the ending of that play was, and it wasn't the defender's fault. He didn't make any contact causing that violent ending. What it was is the Kansas player was going for a dunk rather than a layup. So when he went up and the ball was absent, he grabbed hold of the rim and then let go and kind of came down really hard, and there was a foul called. I think when it comes to those types of things, you immediately after the ball came out, a Samford player came up with it in his hands. I think a rule or ability to challenge maybe late in a game, or have that be something they're checking, going to the monitor for so much stuff, something like that in a game, a close game that could make a difference in the outcome of the game, I think is something that maybe should be looked at, because that could have been a referee thing, like, hey, I'm not sure, but it could be like the NFL, where they say, no, it was an incomplete pass, but the ball came loose. If the other team or whoever jumps on it and picks it up after the review, if they look and say, well, actually it was a fumble, and we see that this team did recover the ball immediately, then you give them possession, because Samford would have gotten that ball. They would have reviewed it. There was no body contact. There was no hand contact. I honestly think they would have said, there was no foul. We're rescinding the foul. Samford got the recovery of that loose ball in an immediate time frame to where we can award the ball to Samford. Then Samford's down 1 point with about 15 seconds left. I'm not saying they would win, but they would have more of a better opportunity and a better look and a better ability to set up their offense and attack Kansas. Kansas was up double digits in that second half, and they had to struggle to win this game. They earned the win. That wasn't Kansas calling that foul. That was a referee missing. And you know what? I'm not damning the referees. They miss calls. They're human beings. They're going to miss calls occasionally, but give them the ability to go back and make it right, because Samford doesn't get year in and year out in an attempt at an upset like this or at a tournament. So you want to give them every best chance to win the game. Now, could they have done things in the process of the game to get them so they're not even in this? Sure. But when we get into the end of the game like this, and you are looking at, well, literally no foul was committed, the phantom foul call, that's something that's kind of important. Let's go take a look at it. Let's verify that we made the right call. And then they go, oh, geez, we didn't make the right call. And you know what? Samford got that loose ball really quickly. We've got to award it to him. Then you're giving them the opportunity to finish off what they've attempted and started to do. So Kansas advances. I don't, honestly, if I'm looking at that matchup, Gonzaga and Kansas, being the type of predictor that I am, I think Gonzaga is going to win. That means Kansas is going to advance. That's just but my whole thing on this one is when it comes to those types of things, let's let the players figure out and decide that game. Then we have North Carolina State, NC State making the tournament they go on a bender for the ACC and win 5 games in 5 days, win the ACC tournament, get into the tournament, don't have to play a first round game. They get a bye into the 11 seed to where they play Texas Tech, a high ranking and a highly touted kind of like dark horse from the Big 12, 6 seed, and NC State keeps on their bender and just roughshod through Texas Tech. Really, there wasn't much of a doubt once they got their lead that they were going to hold on and advance. They knew they weren't going to be playing Kentucky, but at the beginning of the day, you assumed if NC State was going to pull off that upset, they were going to be playing a 3 seed in the Kentucky Wildcats. And surprise, no, that is not what's going on, because Jack Collar, I believe is his name. I'll have to look that up. Hits 10 3-point baskets. He only hit 10 shots the whole game, and he helps the Oakland Golden Grizzlies to advance, stunning the 3 seed Kentucky Wildcats. Jack Gulke, not Kohler. Jack Gulke leads Oakland to that upset over Kentucky, an 80-76 final score. What a game. It was an exciting game, and it's much like I know I've talked about it a little bit last year. I was in Columbus to watch the games there, and I was there for the FDU Purdue game, and throughout the game you could just progressively hear all the non-invested teams, let's say it that way, so not Purdue fans, not FDU fans. All of a sudden it went from Purdue having the most fans to all of a sudden FDU had the majority of the fan noise, because those teams fans that didn't necessarily have a rooting interest started rooting for the underdog. And that's what happened to Kentucky, is those common fans, not there for Kentucky or for Oakland, started rooting for Oakland. So the crowd swayed to there. So it almost became an away game for Kentucky. And Kentucky just could not get rid of Gulke. The 10 threes, he had 7 in the first half, so he wasn't even a huge part. He did make some shots and a couple of free throws there that helped Oakland maintain and retain their lead. But goodness gracious, the Oakland finally gets a big win. It's their second ever tournament win. Their first win was back when the play-in games started, and they were, or the first round games where they were playing in Dayton before the first 4. They had won a game to advance into the 16. So it was the first time that they had ever advanced in the round of 64. So good on Oakland. They will get a date with if you had the 11 and 14 seed playing each other, which I think there's less than 2/10 or 2/100% of all of the brackets are perfect after one day. So after half a round, only like 2/100% of the brackets are perfect. And I'm going to venture to say that probably those are not the first or only brackets somebody does that has the perfect. I do one bracket, stick with it, and just kind of run through with it and as is. And I found that if this tells you anything, I was 50-50 on the first four. Like that, I can't even get those right. And then I was 10 of 16 yesterday, but I still have 15 of my Sweet 16. I still have all of my Elite 8, and I still have all of my Final Four in the tournament going forward. So, okay, so we've kind of gone over everything that happened last night and yesterday in the tournament. Day one of the NCAA tournament in the books. 16 teams have advanced and are ready to play round 2 of the tournament. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to replay yesterday's portion where Dalton and I talked about the Friday slate. Today's slate, the Boilermakers take on Grambling State tonight, this evening. I am obviously ready already, but so we're going to talk. I'm going to replay that so you can kind of get an idea of what we're looking at going forward from the tournament and what we might have today. I listened to yesterday and got to contemplating what we talked about yesterday, and I'm sitting here watching the tournament play out. We were wrong in some spots, but we were also pretty on point with our Thursday analysis. So maybe Friday turns out to where we are perfect, I tell you. But take a listen and watch of our analysis of the Friday slate, and then we also talk about the women's tournament in there. And I have something on the other side of this that to kind of address when it comes to the women's tournament, because I've seen some questions and some complaints, if you will. But go ahead, take in the tournament analysis of the Friday games with Dalton Shetler and myself from yesterday's show. Good.
That's one that we'll need to get to, because that one, I mean, when it popped up, my eyes just got as big as saucers. But so let's go ahead and move to Friday.
Yeah.
We're starting on Friday. The Big Ten will be a part of the first game again, 12:15 in the afternoon. Northwestern against Florida Atlantic. FAU, of course, made it to the Final Four last year.
How about 3 of the 4 Final Four teams in the same pod? Or like the same half of the bracket, not the same pod, same half of the bracket.
Yeah, I had to fight through each other to get back. But FAU had a pretty good year this year. They tested themselves a lot in the non-conference. If I remember right, the record was like 25-7. Again, but really 25 and what?
8.
Okay. And then they lost in their conference tournament. They got an at-large bid. A lot of people didn't have them as maybe high as an 8. They thought they were closer to the bubble than where they ended up. But they get Northwestern, and for the Wildcats, they're in back-to-back big dances for the first time in school history.
Witnessing history, kids.
Chris Collins is making this a regular habit there in Evanston, Illinois.
Pretty soon they're going to expect it every year, Dalton. I don't know.
It happens so fast where you get so spoiled. But so Northwestern plays Florida Atlantic. Boo Booey and March Madness give me all of that. I'm super excited.
I'll drink it like it's just syrup. Like it just is going to be amazingly good.
This should be a really fun game, though. And, of course, Florida Atlantic returned a lot of the nucleus from that squad that made that Final Four run last year. So I think this is going to be a great way to start off on Friday.
Oh, I agree. It's going to be honestly, this could be a pretty decently high-scoring game, too. It's not going to be the Kentucky Oakland potential, but both teams can put points on the board. Now, Northwestern can also go into a big drought too.
Yeah.
I haven't seen enough of Florida Atlantic to know their habits, except for I know they can put points on the board. But Northwestern has shown the tendency to where if it's just Boo hitting shots, it could get very points come as a premium.
Well, and I think though that's going to be part of the recipe, just because Northwestern, again, folks, is pretty banged up. I mean, Ty Berry's done for the year. Like, there aren't as many offensive weapons for the Wildcats anymore.
Right.
It's Boo Booey's show to run and see how he sprinkles the teammates in. But it's give the keys to Boo Booey and let him go. Like, I really think that's where you're at for Northwestern. Other Big Ten matchups on Friday at 6:50 at night. Nebraska, as an 8 seed, will square off with Texas A&M, the 9 seed. Nebraska back in the dance for the first time in 10 years. The last time was 2014. And again, folks, just as a reminder before this game starts, Nebraska is the only Big Ten school that does not have a NCAA tournament win.
How tired are they of that? Hearing that?
They have to be. Well, and they can put it to bed here with this game against Texas A&M. Yep. And given how well Nebraska's played, I think it's pretty possible.
I obviously 8-9 games, even if a 9 seed wins, I never consider that an upset.
Agreed.
It's only an upset according to seeding, but because they try to put the most.
Where do the upsets start? Is it 11-6? Is that where you start?
Yeah, because 7-10 is arbitrary at best too. You know, I mean, if there's more than 3 between the seeds, I think, that's when it starts becoming an upset. That's to me, but Nebraska can, this would be one heck of a 1990s Big 12 matchup. I can tell you right there. But I think Nebraska, with the way they played in the tournament, I mean, they had Illinois down. It took Terrence Shannon Jr. blowing up and come playing out of his mind. And they came back and they went on a little bit of a drought to get beat by Illinois, but they didn't play horribly. So I think they could honestly, I'm not going to say they're going to beat Houston, but I think they could. I think they get off the schneid and beat A&M. But hey, who am I?
But I'm with it too, and they have everything. Look, I think a lot, too, with the NCAA tournament, a lot of it is backcourt play. You've got to have experienced backcourt play that can hit shots. And Keisei Tominaga is that. I mean,
he's got to be one of the best in the country when it comes to just clutchness, right?
Yeah. I mean, and he's able just to hit these big shots. Like, look, they're an 8 seed. So, I mean, if they win, they got a 1. You never really know what's going to happen. But you could almost envision a Steph Curry-like run from Keisei Tominaga. Like that's a very doable
There's
thing.
a reason why he wears number 30.
That's a good point. Let's move over to Purdue. Purdue ends up being the number 1 overall, number
3rd overall seed.
Overall, thank you. Jeez. I'm telling you, as in the words of John Rothstein, we sleep in May. There has not been
That's right.
Over here on this side. But so Purdue, a 1 seed again. Of course, Sam, if you're new to the podcast audience, Sam is a big Purdue fan. He's wearing the Purdue cap right now. He went through the trauma that was last year where you hear at the end, FDU believe it, as Fairleigh Dickinson won.
I was blessed to be able to cover my first tournament. And what do I witness in Columbus is the 2nd largest upset in NCAA tournament
Welcome
history.
to March.
And it honestly, it was not embarrassing. It was humbling is what it was to me. Those guys were shocked, but yet they were humbled at the same time. I don't think they were a bit embarrassed because they owned it. Mm-hmm. But I think this year's going to be a different story. I don't think there's a way that they get beaten this first round. Honestly, say what you want. They're going to go down. The people that absolutely hate Purdue are going to say, well, they're going to lose the second year. No, they're not. If they do, then you know what? Purdue might as well pack it up and not play ever again. And of course, now that I say that, they're no. But my point being is they took that loss and they've built their season to making sure they make a run this year. And I've never been as sure about something, and I'm not a betting person because I don't bet unless I know it's a sure thing. I would be willing to bet money almost like that they're going to make it to the second weekend because they want to prove that we're not just
second weekend even.
Yeah. Yes. So I won't tell you where I've got them going in my bracket, Dalton.
National championship.
Yes. Yes. I've definitely I definitely that's when my fandom comes into play though. I seriously went by just comparing who I have them playing and got them to the Final Four before I started making personal like fan choice, and even then I feel pretty comfortable with at least getting them to the final game with the way my bracket was played out. So but I just Purdue it's different. We've talked about it, I've written about it. It's different this year. There's something that's different about this year compared to what it was last year.
So what's interesting when you talk about Purdue's potential, that region, the 8-9, if they get to that, which we assume they will, as Utah State, TCU, the 2 seed Tennessee, 3 seed Creighton, 4 seed Kansas. And as we talked about earlier, Kansas dealing with injury issues without their leading scorer, McCullough.
And how good is Dickinson because he separated his shoulder?
Yeah, like that's a really favorable region.
You were trying to get another word for easy, weren't you?
Yeah, like I was like, because easy is not the right word. It's
no, never. Yeah,
I mean, but like as far as it goes, that's about as good as you could maybe ask for. The only thing that has me tripped up a little bit, I felt the Purdue team in Minneapolis, and you could question maybe the motives of playing in the Big Ten tournament and how much it even means to a team. And maybe that's part of it. But I did not believe that was their best basketball. And that always, just before you get going into this final ride, that always makes me a little bit more nervous about a team.
Can I ask you, did that feeling come before or after Braden Smith went down hurt?
Before.
Okay. So that's why I was asking, because as soon as he went down, I was like, shut him down and do not let him play again.
I was surprised he came onto the floor.
I think he wanted to put people's mind at ease, and he probably wanted to maybe try it out to make sure that there was nothing really there.
Yeah.
But still, I was shocked he came back to the game. But it also, as a fan, relieved me too, because I texted you as soon as that happened and said, this might be huge.
Yeah, no, I thought so too. I mean, without Braden Smith, that the run of you're talking about potential for Purdue, it changes pretty dramatically.
It would have changed my brackets completely if he'd have blown his knee out.
And that's how so many teams are with some of their star players.
Sure.
I mean, that's no real difference. But yeah, I just didn't think they were playing at the ceiling that they're capable of. And again,
is it motivation?
It could be.
It's the Big Ten tournament. Let's go out. Let's have fun. If we get beat, we get beat. Whatever.
That's why I don't want to make it more than what it is, and that's why, because that could be the variable. But it does concern me. Like I'm interested to see what happens in that game. Not so much.
Is it concerning or intriguing?
I think both.
Okay.
I think it is concerning.
Okay.
If you're a Purdue fan, just because I think they're better than what they played in that tournament, in both the Michigan State game and the Wisconsin game. And I that part concerns me because there's just so little room for error for even the better teams when you get into March Madness. Now, granted, in a 116 game, there's probably some room for error, but you get what I'm saying.
Sure.
If I was a Purdue fan, and again, I don't want to make it bigger than it is because maybe you're right. Maybe it was just the Big Ten tournament. Who really cares? Let's get ready for the NCAA tournament because that's where
because when they stepped into Minneapolis, they were, excuse me, already pretty solidly a number 1 seed. It was just a matter of whether they were the number 1 overall seed or the 4 overall seed. We kind of already knew that was happening.
Yep.
They didn't need that tournament to do anything other than just secure where they would be on the 1 line.
Yep. So and very much that could be a variable. So that's why I don't want to make this like sound the alarms in West Lafayette. But
By the way, just for everybody, I have Purdue and Creighton in the Elite Eight.
I don't hate that.
Yeah. I think Creighton's really an underestimated number 3 seed.
I don't disagree at all. I'm with you on that, partner. I'm absolutely with you. But okay, so we've talked a little bit about Purdue. Let's get to the other game. And this one might be the most, out of all the Big Ten matchups in the first round, this one might be the one I'm most excited for. It's one that you're going to need a few cups of coffee before, because it tips at 9:40 at 9 o'clock Friday night. Yeah. But a 5-12 matchup of Wisconsin, the 5 seed, where Wisconsin, look, beginning of the year, we're playing at a really high level. Boy, did it nosedive in the middle. And now here at the very end in that Big Ten tournament run, they are playing some of their best basketball again. Was really impressed with Wisconsin. They faced James Madison, the champs of the Sun Belt Conference, went 31-3. Look, Big Ten already has seen James Madison this year. They won, if you remember, in overtime on opening night at the Breslin Center in East Lansing, upsetting Michigan State at the time, who was number 4 in the country. And that's before I think James Madison even got confident in who they were going to be. This game is, I think, as intriguing as a Big Ten one gets to start.
I don't disagree. This, excuse me, I have Wisconsin winning it, but it wasn't like, yep, easily Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. It was, golly, because you knew what James Madison's already. You don't go 31-3. It doesn't matter what conference, what level you play at. 31-3 is one hell of a good record, and they're a good team. Nobody wanted James Madison opposing them. But I still think that Wisconsin playing the way they are, I think they win. But Wisconsin has also shown that they can get beat by Michigan, So like this was a tough one for me to even consider. But James Madison, if somebody were to say James Madison makes it to the second weekend, I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And I think too, much to the conversation we were kind of just having there, look, if Wisconsin, the same Wisconsin team that just played Purdue, played Illinois to the wire, if that Wisconsin team shows up, I'm taking Wisconsin. Like, and that's not out of the realm to believe that they're just going to continue the momentum they had in Minneapolis. Like, they played that level in the last game. I thought what Hepburn did at the end of that Purdue game to force overtime is starting to get maybe a bit more aggressive. I think Chucky Hepburn driving the ball and creating offense changes things for Wisconsin dynamically. I thought Klesmet had the clutch floater at the end of that Purdue game. I just think they're resembling a lot of the DNA aspects that go into winners. But I also think James Madison resembles some of that too.
For sure.
That's why I think this one really has me faltering a bit. But this should be a great, great game.
The way I did my bracket, I assumed that Wisconsin was going to carry it on the way they played in Minneapolis. If they play the way they are or have been in Minneapolis and did at the beginning of the season, I think they could push Houston in the Sweet 16. Honestly, they're that good. Well, and I keep falling back to it. Wisconsin was number 6 in the country when they played Purdue the first time.
Yep.
They didn't get there by accident. They just hit a really rough patch that allowed them to lose what was 8 of 11 that put them in the position that they're in now. They recovered and started playing well to where they made it to the finals of the Big Ten tournament. I think that's the true Wisconsin team that is there. They hit a bad spot and went into a big slump, and it earned them the 5 seed. Now it earned them a game against a very tough 12 seed, but I still think they can. I still think they can power through that, and I have them losing to Houston in the Sweet 16.
Yeah, fair enough. And Houston's played so well this year too, so no shame in there. Real quick before we move to women's basketball, I want to throw this in, and if you have anything else on the men's side before we segue over. Ohio State head coach now, Jake Diebler, was promoted, and the interim tag was removed in the final 8 games of the year, won 6 of them, only lost 2, really had a good showing there in the Big Ten tournament. In the NIT, they defeated Cornell in the first round. I'm looking to see when they play again, March 23rd and March 24th. They'll play I didn't see who won between March 20 or between Virginia Tech or Richmond. I'll look that up in a minute. But they're still in postseason ball as of now. I thought this was a really cool move because I don't know, Sam. Maybe it's just seeing, how the world works and not. I had a belief growing up that everything was kind of based on merit. You work hard, you do good, and you kind of get promoted and things work themselves out. And then you kind of enter the world and you see that's not always how everything goes. And for Jake Diebler, that happened for him. And I thought for me, that kind of restored a little bit of faith just in the goodness of hard work, the goodness and belief, and so on.
Yeah, you know what? He completely earned this position. Even if, in 2 years the new AD decides, you know what, this isn't working out because they flounder where they're at, where they did with Holtman the last 2 years. That happens, but yeah, you're exactly right. Look what that core of players did when they made him the interim, and then it earned him the head coach position. And if at the very least it's a really good feel good story.
Absolutely.
Of you put your time in, you work your way up, and you get that payoff. And I hope. I'm not an Ohio State fan. I'm far from it. But you know what? I hope he does well enough to do some things that are special, just not against Purdue anymore.
I understand that. And of course, his first win as the interim coach.
Yep, right. That's what I'm saying is please, let's not do that anymore.
But they'll be playing Virginia Tech in the second round of the NIT. But I thought that was some pretty good news as well. So let's go ahead and move over to the women's side real quick before we end up getting out of here. Taking a look at a couple of the matchups there. Iowa, the number 1 seed, will be playing at 3:00 on Saturday against the 16. A tough region for Caitlin Clark.
Yeah, you ain't joking.
Pretty interested to see how this one goes because, of course, this is look. If you have been just gobbling up all the Caitlin Clark showcase, all the different things that there is, you're going to get a lot more of that. I mean, it's been reported that Holly Rowe is going to be a designated reporter for Caitlin Clark, where she's just following Clark around and reporting. So, look, if
you're not a fan of Caitlin Clark, don't watch the tournament.
It's going to stranglehold the coverage, but again, it's worked out pretty well for ratings and whatnot. So that should be interesting to see how they navigate.
Yes, I'm looking at this region they're in. My good Lord.
Yeah.
They've got LSU, which is a rematch from the finals last year if they make it.
Yep.
UCLA's in there. Creighton is the 7 seed. Goodness. Louisville, Kansas State, Colorado. Goodness.
Yeah.
They didn't give them and do them any favors, did they?
Not at all. So that's a tough region for Iowa. Moving over, Michigan gets a 9 seed. They're going to be out in LA in the Southern California hosting site. But 9 seed Michigan will take on 8 seed Kansas. That is on Saturday at 2:00. So Michigan makes it back in what is kind of a down year for the Wolverines overall. But Layla Filia and the Wolverines able to get back in. I thought 9 was a very generous seed.
I thought so too.
They were right on the bubble, and what catapulted them in, I suppose you could say, is that they beat Indiana in the Big Ten tournament, but Mackenzie Holmes wasn't playing in that game. And I don't know, I guess that win was worth jumping 10 teams or whatever.
Maybe the committee didn't see that Mackenzie Holmes didn't play.
Well, it raises those kinds of questions because it
makes you wonder what they were watching, huh?
But like I said, on the men's side, I was pretty dizzied by some of the results that came out in the seeding, and the women pretty similarly. I was surprised by a couple. So Michigan will be playing on Saturday. Friday at noon, Ohio State will take on Maine. That's a 2:15 game, 2 seed versus 15.
Now, you remember the Maine Bears played IU, and I think they played them really well, didn't they?
They did. IU went out there because Mackenzie Holmes is from Maine.
Right.
And Indiana was struggling earlier in the year. So I didn't actually see that game. I don't know how much of it was Maine and how much of it was just Indiana still figuring themselves out.
Fair enough.
But it's a fair point to bring up. So Ohio State will start with Maine. If they win, they'll get the winner between Duke and Richmond there.
I hate spiders.
10 seed Maryland starts with 7 seed Iowa State. Look, if you're looking for games to watch, this should be one of those because Iowa State has one of the more talented freshmen in the country in Audie Crooks. Seeing her go against Cheyenne Sellers and the Terps, that will be a fun watch.
Yeah, Maryland getting in with a 10 seed. Like they were on the bubble before, but then when they thumped Ohio State, that just
you can't get rid of Brenda Freeze that easy. You just can't. I mean, it's just amazing. Even in their worst year and however many, they're still in the dance.
Yeah, and you got to think that maybe they were a first 4 if they hadn't beaten Ohio State. But
they would have been right on that line.
The fact that they gave them a thumping got them out of the first 4 and into a bye at a 10 seed. So good on them. I hope that they've got a tall order if they beat Iowa State though, because then you've got Stanford. So it doesn't get easy for the 10 seed if they advance.
So we'll see what happens with them. Elsewhere, Nebraska gets a 6 seed. They're taking on Texas A&M, just like the men are. Nebraska and Texas A&M.
I wonder if that's ever happened before much, to where the men and women play the same team in their tournament.
Well, and of course, this one gets juicier because Trev Alberts, who is a Nebraska AD, just left for Texas A&M.
Correct. Yes.
So this is an interesting sequence, but that is a.
You got to think the committees did it on purpose.
But it's a Friday night game at 10:30 for Nebraska and Texas A&M. And again, Nebraska had an impressive showing in Minneapolis in that Big Ten tournament. Was really a shot away from winning it, knocking off Caitlin Clark and the Hawkeyes.
Yeah, what a final! Oh goodness, what a final! You know, it went to overtime. Nebraska. I think they obviously worked their way into a 6 seed because of their performance in Minneapolis.
Yep.
But that just tells me that it doesn't matter who they're playing. They could probably knock off a couple of teams and get to maybe that second weekend if they can get it clicking.
Yeah. No, I'm totally with you. And then Indiana, a 4 seed, will be scoring off with 13 seed Fairfield. That's a Saturday game at 1:30. It'd be interesting to see what the Hoosiers again. Holmes went down at the end of the regular season. Her backup, Lily Meister, went down with an injury at the end of the regular season. So their 2 posts went down with injuries. It's been 2 weeks, though, since then. 2 to 3 weeks, 3 weeks since the end of the regular season.
Yeah.
Be interesting to see if they're healthy and back to 100% heading into the dance.
If they're not, you got to think there's something major wrong if that's the case. I mean, not saying that they're not doing everything they can to get healthy, but if they're still not ready to go after that long of a layoff, oh wow, you got to worry. I'm not gonna say they're gonna make it to the Elite 8 or Final 4, but they should get to the second weekend. Depend, on their resume alone, they're a good basketball team. It's a matter of course, they should have made it to the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 in last year too.
Yes.
But they fell short. But that's not kicking dirt on them or anything. That's just it is what it is on that.
Yeah.
But, hopefully they can regain and make a move.
And then we can we'll wrap with the first game of the women's side. 9 seed Michigan State taking on 8 seed North Carolina. This game's in Columbia, South Carolina. It's a 11:30 tip on Friday morning to get you going with what is going to be a crazy day with both the men and women.
So Michigan State kicks off the tournament, both tournaments.
Yes.
Wow. All right. Oh.
I know it's a nice little nugget. I don't know what it means.
That Nebraska and A&M play each other,
But that should really be an interesting one. Of course, Michigan State had a tough one in Minneapolis. They fell to Nebraska in the Big Ten tournament quarterfinals. Nebraska, though, as we've talked about, is a bad matchup for Michigan State. The Spartans have 7 players in the rotation mainly, and they're all guards. They're 6'2" or shorter. So you get a really good post player. It makes life pretty tough.
Yeah.
So that should really be a great game between Michigan State and North Carolina. And then, of course, the winner most likely gets undefeated #1 overall South Carolina. They're at South Carolina, and that would be look. It sets up for an incredible opportunity.
You want to say the biggest upset in women's college basketball history? That would be it, Riley.
It's got to be in that discussion, I would imagine. I suppose I don't know the
I know there have been 1 seeds that have gotten beat by 16 seeds, but still not at the extent of undefeated.
As dominant as they've been. They've only lost 1 game in the last 2 years, and it was in the Final Four. Like,
correct, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So that should be pretty interesting. But for Michigan State, seeing if they can get by North Carolina, this is a game that's going to be interesting because they play differently. Michigan State wants to get out and run. North Carolina, not as much. They want to get it into the half court. It'll be a fight for tempo, and should be a great way to kick off the Friday because you got round of 64 games for the men and women on that Friday. It's going to be a lot of basketball.
Oh, if you are a college basketball fan, you are going delirious right now. Delirious right now. It is great. It is great. This is our Christmas right now.
It really is. This is the best time of the year. So get all the TVs out, get them all ready.
I've shown you what I do. I've got the capability of splitting it into 4. I'll have 4 games going at once.
It's a seasoned vet right there.
Yeah. All right. So that was our analysis of what games are happening today and how we kind of feel about that. We also jump into the women's bracket and talk about that. I've seen some things about a little bit of complaints about how the committee has placed teams in the bracket on the women's side, and that Iowa is on the same side as South Carolina. And what a lot of people aren't considering, and here's the thing: I'm not a huge fan of either committee. They make some silly mistakes. The men's side, there's no excuse and no validity, and I don't care what the explanation they give, to Virginia making it over Indiana State. Indiana State was a net top 20 or top 30 net ranking team. First time ever that a team has ranked in the top 30 of the net rankings and not made the NCAA tournament. And then you have Virginia, who gets an at-large bid and has a first 4 game that they overwhelmingly underperform in, but they were ranked in the 60s in their net rankings. So to me, there's no excuse for that. But let's get to the point of the women's side, and with Iowa being a 1 seed on the same side as the favorite and the undefeated South Carolina Gamecocks. What a lot of people don't understand is Iowa for the longest time was a 2 seed projection, which means they're at least the 5th overall seed, at least at the very best, the 5th overall top seed. So they would be the best seeded number 2 seed. Well, and Ohio State, who is a 2 seed now in the bracket, was an overall 1 seed, or not the overall 1 seed, but on the 1 line for the longest time. Ohio State got thumped by Maryland in the Big Ten tournament. So they lost that 1 seed because their early exit from the tournament. Iowa then moved up in their seedings because they won the tournament. So they improved. Now, both committees already have a formula of where teams go in the brackets when they have a finalized overall seeding. So Iowa being the number 5 seed or the 5th overall best team, and I don't even know that's where they were, but if that's where they were, they worked their way up to get to probably the 4th overall seed. So yes, they won the Big Ten tournament and went from a 2 seed to a 1 seed, but they only jumped maybe 1 overall seed to get to that 1 line. They only needed to move that far. So yes, they improved their seeding. Now, if they would have been the fourth overall number 2 seed and they improved only one, they still would have been a 2 seed. They just would have been the third overall 2 seed. So they went from maybe the best 2 seed up to the fourth 1 seed. Well, the fourth 1 seed and the number 1 overall seed go on the same side of the bracket. The number 1 overall seed gets the worst seeded 1 seed on their side. That means the second and third seeded number 1 seeds go to the right side. So there is not, I understand that this is a travesty. They should be playing in the national championship. Well, now we have something in place where these teams are seeded overall and then they get slotted in. That leaves no interpretation as to where to put them to the committee. Now, what the committee does have an issue or have the ability to do is to rank them overall, to seed them overall. No doubt that South Carolina is the number 1 overall seed on the women's bracket. No doubt. Like Dalton just got done saying in yesterday's show, was they have the only game they've lost in the last 2 years was in the Final Four last year. So there's no doubt that they're the overall number 1 seed. And with Iowa being most of the year, they lost some games in the Big Ten. That doesn't take away from their talent or that they are probably one of the best 4 teams in the country, maybe the number 2 best team. But their performance overall for the season earned them the 4th overall 1 seed. They're the 4th overall seed, top seed. So that means they're a 1 seed, but they're on the same side as South Carolina. So that matchup will come in the Final Four if they do indeed play in the NCAA tournament. It's no conspiracy. It's not a bumbling even of the seedings. The committee had Iowa as the 4th best overall seed, and they get slotted in at that spot on the opposite or on the same side of the bracket as South Carolina. So I understand the confusion. I understand that's not right. It shouldn't, you don't want Caitlin Clark playing the best team overall in the Final Four, because what happens in the final? Well, you know what? Do better in the regular season. I'm not at all saying that, Iowa's horrible, but if you don't want that chance, do better. And that's to say they played some teams that had their number. Ohio State beat them in the first time that they played. There are teams that beat Iowa during the season. If you don't want to be on the same side as South Carolina and you don't want to see South Carolina until the finals, do better to be the 2nd or 3rd best number or best team. You can't really control that portion because the committee has slots to where they rank overall or they seed overall, and then they just slot in. So that's my little piece on the travesty that is Iowa being on the same side of the bracket as South Carolina. While I would like to see South Carolina and Iowa play in the finals, one team did their part. The other team didn't quite do theirs. They're still one of the best teams in the country, if not the best team, with the best player. And I think that's where we come into issue is the best player on the in the game right now is going to end up playing the best team in the tournament and in women's college basketball in the Final Four rather than the finals. Her last game could be against that team and they lose. Whereas it could be her last game and they lose, but it's in the national championship game. And so I understand why it's a little upsetting, but at the same time, do better. And then you don't have to worry about not seeing South Carolina until the finals, or getting that huge marquee matchup. And so there's still going to be a lot of great basketball in this tournament. And Dalton was talking, Michigan State tips off the tournament here at 11:30, so another hour and a half until the women's tournament kicks off on their day one with Michigan State UNC. And who does Michigan State on the men's side play tomorrow? UNC. Then we also have today we have Texas A&M and Nebraska playing on the men's side, and I believe it's tomorrow the Texas A&M women take on the Nebraska women. So we have a couple of similar matchups there for each side, and both including Big Ten teams. So that brings us to the end of our Friday NCAA March Madness special. So excited that it's here. It's time. We're in the throes of it. We've got one more full wall-to-wall day, and then tomorrow it starts where it starts whittling down. Only 8 games tomorrow, 8 games on Sunday, but we have 16 today. So we have 32 more games this weekend to enjoy on the men's side, and then you throw all those games for the women's side as well. So if you're a college basketball fan, this is the most wonderful time of the year. So let's get at how you can reach us and find us on social media. You can go to the TikToks, the Instagrams, and the platform formerly known as Twitter. It is at B1G_talk. It's B1G_talk, not BIG, B1G_talk. And you'll find us there on those platforms. Go to Facebook. It's B1G Talk, Big Talk, not all Big Talk. Those people are just fine, and they're great people over there, but they're not us. So it's at Big Talk there. And then you go find us on ASAP every Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern. On Friday, we live stream, and later that day through Lounge Media Group, you'll find us everywhere you find podcasts. If you want to watch the stream, the video stream, if you missed it live, you can go to Spotify, and our video is up there as well. So for Dalton Shetler, who is out on assignment and getting ready to enjoy some Big Ten NCAA women's tournament basketball. He's out there. I'm Sam Sprunger. Thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy the games, everybody. It is going to be a fantastic and wonderful weekend of wall-to-wall basketball. Hopefully some upsets. Hopefully your brackets don't bust too badly. And you know what? We'll see you next week. Have fun this weekend. See ya.